All right, everybody. I do believe we are live. Welcome to another episode of Break the Rules. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov at LevPo on Twitter or X. And today we are doing something very special. We are doing a simultaneous stream on YouTube as well as on X Spaces. So this has never been done before. This is the very first time, and you guys are going to be here for it. Let's see what happens. We are going to be talking today about Elon Musk's DOGE, about whether it's right that he is defunding all these various aspects of USAID, and what prospects this means for the future. Not so much as far as cutting the fat, but whether we're going to see some bad repercussions from this, whether we're going to see a new technocratic world order arise that is this top-down system that we've been kind of rug pulled into accepting just because of how insufferable a lot of the leftists are. So I don't know where you guys stand on this. We're going to find out, and we have the wonderful Peachy Keenan back with us today. Erik Finman, crypto millionaire, probably soon to be billionaire. I don't know. Maybe you already are a billionaire.
And, no, working on it though. Working on it.
Yes, and Samuel Hammond. Back, I recall you were part of the. I'm never going to get this word right, but I'm going to do my best shot. The Niskanen Center. Did I get it right?
Yeah. Niskanen, right, but that's
Niskanen. Yeah, that's
in the past.
Not as bad as I did last time. So, what is happening with you right now, brother?
I do AI policy at the Foundation for American Innovation.
There we go. So
tech right.
It is right in the topic of what we're talking about here with DOGE. So I am going to get this started with, let's actually start with you, Samuel. So are you getting similar potentially bad vibes from what may occur, even if the heart may be in the right place, from defunding a lot of these bloated government bureaucracies, or am I being too conspiratorial here?
Isn't this what you wanted, Lev? This is what this is all leading up to, right? This is what Break the Rules is for.
Well, what do you want? That's the question here. Do you want there to be this kind of top-down technocracy, or do you want there to be checks to power? Because that's my main concern here. I'm very happy with what's been going on with DOGE, but there's always this thing in the back of my mind that this may be a rug pull. This may be just, prepping people to take it easy now. We get our guys in charge. It's all going to be based. But if you can steelman the opposition to that, what would you say? What kind of problems do you think we may be encountering down the road if there is not going to be like the strong Democrat Party or whichever other party that's going to be opposed to this?
I think DOGE has multiple purposes. The surface purpose is cost-cutting, waste, fraud, and abuse, fiscal savings, and certainly doing some of that, but I don't think that's the primary purpose. I think there's two other purposes. One other purpose is sort of dismantling the institutions of globalism and the deep state, where really post-war period, but really accelerating under first Kennedy and then through the 70s, we've built this sort of global technocracy for managing global capitalism. USAID is a part of that. It's the reason we talk about the deep state or the permanent state is because these are sort of roles that provide continuity between different administrations. They're sort of shielded from actual democratic politics. And that has pluses and minuses, right? So whether this is a good thing or bad thing will depend on your preferences. On the one hand, USAID, is an expression of American soft power. It's used to influence foreign elections abroad, to destabilize politics and regimes that we maybe don't like. On the other hand, that could be a good thing, And I think one of the challenges here is that USAID exists in this sort of gray area where you can't actually talk about its actual purpose. You have to talk about it as a humanitarian thing that we're curing HIV or something like that. And that's definitely part of what they do. Because to be completely explicit about what its actual purpose is, as like an expression of American empire and creating markets for American exports and creating regimes that are safe for global capitalism, I'm a fan of global capitalism, so I kind of don't hate that. On the other hand, I understand why populism, insofar as populism is like this reassertion of popular sovereignty, that this is first in the chopping block.
Well, when it comes to the soft power, I don't think what we've been seeing were in any way good examples of that power being utilized properly. If we're talking about George Floyd murals in Afghanistan, I wouldn't necessarily say that lends any kind of respect towards America on behalf of a lot of these foreign people. I mean, I come from the Soviet Union back in the day, and America was seen as this strong country full of liberty, but the conflation that I think this next generation has made between liberty and having a lot of this woke policy being done at the same time, which is very anti-liberal. To me, that never made sense, nor does it make sense when people use the word liberal to describe the people who are in these positions of power. So I don't know. Peachy, what is your take on the situation?
Well, I mean, probably you can tell from, the way I've been tweeting, but I'm like basically a DOGE absolutist. Like, I think everything they're doing is awesome. I'm completely, if I had like a 19-year-old son who was interested, I would be shipping him over to Elon to put him to work, literally in like the mines where they keep all the paperwork for the federal retirement system. And I actually think it was either this or a bloody civil war or revolution. Like that was the only two options to kind of claw back our sovereignty, our rights as voters, to stop living under this like oppressive, insane, giant, whatever it is, the bureaucracy, the oligarchy. And so this was actually the best option because, there's no blood. There's no actual like fighting on the streets. And I actually think they're being quite gentle. I think actually they're being quite judicious and careful. I mean, there was a lot of talk in the last few years of going in and just like burning all these buildings in DC to the ground, like just literally wrecking balls and bulldozers and just wiping them out, salting the earth. So they're being quite gentle. And I think they're making sort of small cuts. I mean, what do they take? Like 3% of federal employees, and they're cutting here and cutting there. And I think it is totally essential. And in terms of, projecting power abroad and global capitalism, the only thing we've been projecting abroad for the last, 3, 5, maybe even 10 years has been the liberal values of, basically gay race communism, transgenderism, and, abortion rights, and name the like third world hellhole. And so those are not really the global capitalist values that I would like to project abroad. So I think what they're doing is awesome. And I'll fight to the death to keep them going.
I'm a fan of DOGE. I think you have to be careful what you wish for and sort of understand that there's like lots of Chesterton fences that we're knocking over right now. And
maybe.
And I want to just like whatever your preference is to know to know cause and effect, right? Right now with the foreign aid freeze and the ending of USAID, there's 800,000 people in Sudan who have their food cut off. That's an example. This humanitarian program that's feeding people in a war-torn part of the world. That has a humanitarian element. It's also to try to prevent refugee migration into Europe and other parts of the world that can be very destabilizing to politics. And I'm also a critic of our interventions in the Middle East and Syria and so on and so forth, to the extent that has destabilized the region, sending floods of people. And if you want to create the Camp of Saints, this is how you do it. And this is also one of the reasons why the left has also been like historically the bigger critic of USAID and the NGO complex, because they see this as sort of keeping down the global south.
For those who don't know, what is Camp of Saints? It is a French novel, right?
Yeah, you can call it. It's a novel.
Well, what is it about?
Some people think it's like historical fiction, I guess.
But from what I understand,
there's waves of refugees into Europe, and this I've never read Camp of Saints, so you tell me. But it leads to a kind of right-wing backlash.
Yeah, I mean, that is the other problem here, that unfortunately, because we are so interconnected and, airplanes exist and ship travel exists, we're not going to be able to keep elements of the third world from, just living in these completely isolated reservations. Like, ideally, there could be some kind of a Star Trek rule when it comes to, well, let's leave certain cultures, the way that they are, as long as they don't bother us, we don't bother them. I don't remember what that principle is called, but that could, the Prime Directive. That's it. It was called the Prime Directive. So unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of world. So whether it comes to, infections, whether it comes to other things having to do with the third world, it feels like our hands are tied. And if our hands aren't tied, then it's only going to be like China coming in there and colonizing those areas and expanding their power as well. So I don't know, Erik, I think the two of us have agreed a lot when it comes to things like Ukraine and the American empire as being potentially a force for good. But
Absolutely, yeah.
what do you think there?
There's the term the globalist American empire. I believe in, I'm a little different than maybe a normal right-wing person in the sense I believe in a based American empire. We love a nice bay. And I want, yeah, in a perfect world, I would love to go into USAID and keep all the capitalist shit and get rid of the liberal bullshit. But it seems to always go hand in hand. Like Toria Newland, she used to work for Dick Cheney, then she became, this kind of big liberal here. And I just wish, rather than, when the IMF loans money to Ukraine, this was even before the Ukraine war, they don't make it a condition that you have to treat transgender shit in the fucking schools. And the Ukrainian, they're all talk about democracy. The Ukrainian, I think, parliament would be the term, voted to get rid of teaching that type of shit in the schools. And then IMF said, well, give us our money back then. Like, so I still believe in loaning, doing IMF loans for soft power domination. But I want to be, teaching, that Reagan and Trump are the greatest things to happen since sliced bread in their schools instead of transgender stuff. So, and then maybe a normal right-wing person would be like, they're a sovereign country. They should teach what they want. But I think we agree it's a small world. It's China's going to be, pressuring them to teach what they want, Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So I wish you could go in USAID and cut the liberal shit and keep kind of the soft power domination and add kind of based, right-wing, influence, soft power, money bribery operations effectively. I would love that. But I think this is why I love what DOGE is doing is I think, unfortunately, yeah, some maybe some good programs will be cut, but there's I think you got to just start from zero and then build it back up. And that's why I love what DOGE is doing.
Peachy,
one comment just to clarify. They're not saying that they're never going to give food and medicine to poor countries. That's not what they're saying. They're saying they're going to move it into the State Department. So just to clarify, we're not going to suddenly starve Africa. Bye, everyone. No, it's going to be done through the State Department in a more managed, careful way. And look, frankly, we've been sending how many billions and billions and billions of dollars to Africa and Haiti and all these countries. How are they doing? How's Haiti doing, guys? Like, not so great. And the immigration, to your point, Sam, people are coming. The boats keep going to France and Spain and England. So all that aid and food to Africa isn't stopping immigration necessarily. So what is the problem? So, I mean, there's other solutions there for immigration, but really the key is that they're not going to let, all these sick babies die. There's just going to be a different route for it. And there may be a pause in it now. I mean, there's some disruption obviously now, but I don't think that all humanitarian aid is over forever. And there was huge waste. Remember in Haiti, after the earthquake, giant pallets of USAID food and water was rotting on the tarmac. Remember that? And the Clinton billions of dollars of shit was just wasted. So.
And who was that? Was that Laura Silsby who was there on behalf of the Clinton Foundation? I haven't followed that story that much. There's probably some rabbit holes in there. But anyway,
no, I'm very sympathetic to all this, and my perspective is also probably closer to Erik's, where it's less about do we have this structure, but how do we use it and wield it into what ends. And one of the reasons you have to go through this sort of reassertion of executive authority is because the way these systems operated is as a kind of third sector that has autonomy. There's not rooms full of lizard people actually planning all this stuff. It sort of drifts as part of the elite culture, and you need to come over the top if you want to reorient and turn that ship of state.
Probably a few lizard people.
But do you guys believe
maybe? But
so Erik does lean more into America being this empire that shines its light over all these other countries. Do you, Peachy, have more of an isolationist point of view when it comes to where you're seeing America going forward?
No, not at all. I totally agree with Erik. I think, I'm an American supremacist, obviously. And I don't know if that's allowed anymore. Okay. But there's a difference between being, wanting to promote America and American values and patriotism here and abroad, and being, an isolationist. It's a little bit different. Like, for example, I don't think a good way to promote American supremacy is to invade other countries. So I'm like totally anti-war. Okay. I think that was actually huge. That backfired on us. That created so much hatred and anti-Americanism. I mean, the French still hate us for World War II. Okay. Like, you can never win. And sort of the British. So being an isolationist, like in terms of foreign policy, yes, 100%, which means no optional wars. We have to put America first for the first time. Like, have we ever done that? Like, I don't know. Let's try it. Maybe, it's been 200 years. Let's try it again. But we can still promote American greatness just by being great. Like, just by being great, America has always been the country everyone wanted to come to, like, unfortunately, kind of for us. But being even greater will, always be good. And we, as long as we build a bigger wall, what it does is it makes other people in other countries want to be like us. They don't have to come here. Maybe they can do it in their own homes. I mean, isn't that really at the end of the day the answer to like the global migration crisis?
Absolutely. I don't know. I think we're all pretty much in agreement there. But I do want to focus more on the negative side, which is not so much with USAID, but with somebody like Elon Musk, who, again, you could have somebody who could be the greatest leader of all time. But if there aren't going to be any checks to their power, whether we're talking about Trump, whether we're talking about Elon, then eventually the concern is that there's going to be a degradation. Because if you start getting surrounded with a bunch of toadies that just tell you whatever it is that you want to hear, it's going to be a lot harder to not degrade and start imposing your will onto people who feel like, well, my job's on the line, just like a lot of these Democrats must have felt. My job's on the line, so I'm going to look the other way if A, B, or C happens. So I want there to be a better oppositional party to the MAGA group, but right now I don't see any. Like, the Democrats suck, and the old school, rhino Republicans, neocons, that's not the answer either. So you see what I mean? Like, I want there to be something to fight off whatever degradation ends up setting in, which in history we've seen that happen a lot. So I don't know what you guys think. Erik, any thoughts?
Some say the degradation and the technocracy is the status quo ante. And like, you can come at this from multiple perspectives. Like, when I was a kid, I read a lot of Chomsky, and that's where I learned that, like, USAID was under the Clintons was responsible for basically destroying Haiti's domestic agricultural industry on behalf of U.S. agribusiness, right? And then that set them up several 15 years later, when the earthquake hit, to not have any domestic capacity for food. And so there's like huge pluses and minuses. And then, I kind of went through more of a phase of like making peace with the global American empire and the fruits that it brings, the fact that it lets us have cheap food and relative security. But there's always that kernel in me that's been a critic of U.S. empire, more from like a Tulsi Gabbard kind of perspective, an anti-neocon perspective. And like, you can make the argument both ways. You could also say that what Trump is doing and what this project is doing is actually greatly diminishing U.S. power relative to China and relative to, just like Marco Rubio has said as much, that it's a pivot to multipolarity. It's kind of a unilateral disarmament on the global stage. And, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I think we could have a little bit more humility. We could have some like self-consciousness or self-awareness that we aren't in a unipolar moment anymore. But we have to acknowledge that's what this is. This is not a reassertion of American supremacy. It's actually objectively a turn inward.
I don't know. Like, I think the problem here is that when you are of the mind that you are equal to whatever it is that China and Russia stand for, or even if you disagree on the principles, you think, well, they're so strong, there's nothing we can do, we might as well just give up now. My concern is that that's going to be ceding a lot more ground to these countries going forward. And it's not like dealing with, I always bring up the Austro-Hungarian Empire or some other, civilized counter to American hegemony. I don't see China or Russia or Iran as being civilized at all. I think that they're Eastern despots that if like those people rule the world, then we might as well just like wait for the meteor to hit any minute because it's not going to be worth it. Like
right. Which is
these are
why
not-
we should.
Yeah.
These are bittersweet changes. We need to acknowledge
Eric,
these
yes.
trade-offs.
Yeah, I want to say something. I have a very, I think, a similar view to Samuel in the sense, but I think in the short term, you're absolutely right in the sense these cuts actually do, maybe short term undercut some foreign U.S. power. But the problem is that USAID was funding this global left-wing network and opposition parties to, kind of based, right-wing, even aggressive, not even like leave the EU type people, parties and stuff. Like, I want people that believe in that the lines of today and the way the world is, that this is not the end of history, that lines and borders of countries can be moved. And the problem is that USAID and National Endowment for Democracy and all these different, threads and buckets of money ultimately fund just poor man, shitty 2012 Obama campaign candidates for all of these people that are all, we have to lie. We can't, colonize anything. We can't move any borders on anything. And, France, they say, oh, we believe in decolonization, but yeah, they own the banks, they own the ports and all that. And it's owning things without honesty. And I want honesty in foreign policy. So I think long-term, because I'm a big Europhile, I'm a dual citizen, UK, US and everything. And I want these all this money is going to stopping these people from getting elected and all this. And I don't necessarily want all these withdraw EU people, but I want people that just are much more aggressive and have honesty in foreign policy. I think it was one of the greatest crimes that Charles de Gaulle had to give up or gave up Algeria and everything. I want candidates that get elected, that don't believe in the borders of today and don't believe in the end of history, and cutting these terrible people at USAID that some might have some good soft power programs. Actually, they definitely do. But ultimately they elect poor man 2012, not even cool 2008 Obama, like 2012 out of McKinsey, Obama, poor man, shittier versions of that campaign around the world. And I want them gone. And I want better people to get elected that believe in empire building openly.
Well, hopefully those people are not going to be China, because over here we have some interesting comments from C-Spam. And by the way, guys, if you want to support the show, don't forget to sneed those super chats as well. Every bit helps. And by the way, for all those who are listening on Spaces right now, you see the link above that says youtube.com. Click that, watch the YouTube version, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. Anyway, here's the comments from C-Spam. Even if you agree with getting rid of USAID, you should be skeptical of Elon's involvement in it, given he's one of the only foreigners allowed to own private property in China. How did he pull that? And then he says, there is no Chinese partnership with this Tesla gigafactory in China, which isn't heard of. He's the only one. Elon has ties to all our enemies. It's obvious. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Peachy, go for it.
I mean, I have no idea. I'm not really too worried that Elon is some kind of Chinese mole or something. I'm really not. I mean, look, Disney, when I worked at Disney, they opened Shanghai Disneyland. So, I mean, there's a lot of American, boots on the ground in China. It's common. And so I'm not really concerned about that at all.
Eric, what do you think?
I think you got to watch out for it. But yeah, like, for example, it seemed that, there was some indication China was okay with Elon owning half of TikTok or owning all of TikTok or something like that. But, I actually do think that you have to kind of watch out for that with, whether, maybe with Elon. But I think so far he brought free speech back to America. So I'm not bothered and everything. So I think you got to be vigilant, but if he gets a hold of TikTok in some form, and TikTok becomes as free speech at Twitter, literally I kind of think nothing's ever over for any opposition party, but the global left is in such a precarious, bad scenario that will be tough for them to get out of if Elon owns TikTok. So anyways, I think a little bit, but I don't think it's a huge deal.
Samuel.
Look, I think if we went to war with China today, we'd lose. And we have to really reassess our relative position. And I'm not a total decoupler, right? I believe that we need to build up our own supply chains and so on and so forth, partly to prepare for the inevitable. But I believe that reluctantly. There was a 3-year period during the Biden administration where there was zero diplomatic back channel between the U.S. and Chinese military, and that's a disaster. That's worse than during the Cold War. Like, at least we talked to the Soviets, and so having some, commerce and exchange with China, with folks in power, I actually don't think is a bad thing, because and this is also one of the reasons why I support a pivot to a more realist foreign policy, one where, yes, we pivot to focusing on Asia, but we also recognize where our real interests lie, and it's not in lecturing countries about their human rights violations necessarily. It's more about understanding relative power and asserting deterrence, but not believing that we can win a war over Taiwan if that broke out.
Well, as far as Taiwan, I don't know, but when it comes to, let's say, Russia, Ukraine, there was that recent news with Pete, how do you say his last name? Hegseth, thank you. When Pete Hegseth was talking about how there's not going to be any NATO that would be, Ukraine's not going to be a part of NATO, and how the peacekeeping troops who are going to be stationed there, they are not going to be invoking Article 5 if those peacekeeping troops were to be attacked in the future by Russia. So the concern here is that, yes, you should be realistic when looking at all these different scenarios, but it seems like all this is doing, if this peace deal were to come through, is that it would allow Russia to regroup, possibly with the help of a lot of Chinese money, in a couple of years, and then go right back into doing what they were doing with a lot more power than they currently have right now after they got a chance to rest. And there's not really going to be anything explicitly stated here that's going to prevent them from going forward. Like, what would be the reason for them not to at that point? And then we're back to the scenario that a lot of people who are, more in the MAGA base have talked about, where we don't want to risk nuclear war, but then that's going to be the same excuse for any country, where it can say, okay, if you guys don't give me this piece of land, I'm going to nuke you. And multiply that by 100 and see where that gets us. That's not a great scenario, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Our policy in Ukraine has been a disaster, and it goes actually to something Erik was saying, which is we've sort of lost the kind of a more formalist approach to empire, where we actually make explicit how we're using our power. Instead, we take all these half measures, and we've done this time and time again, where we commit ourselves just enough that no American feels any harm, but we don't actually have any decisive victories on the part of the people we're supporting. Instead, we actually tend to support wars to a stalemate, which is like the worst possible thing to do, because that's maximally destructive. We even saw that when there was reports that folks in the Biden NSC were talking about arming the Lebanon army to fight along Hezbollah. It's like, what are we doing here? And so, like, having some more explicit policy goals, where we either commit ourselves or we don't, but we don't sort of try to have our cake and eat it too, it would be a good thing. Where Elon fits into this is that he's really a Renaissance man. He is a globalist. He's a cosmopolitan, right? But I also think he's American, and I think he cares a lot about America, and I think he recognizes that this reset was going to be inevitable. We need to have like some actual stewardship, some actual grand strategy, and we can't just let this thing go on drift and autopilot, because that's how you get sort of moral blackmail and grandstanding leading your foreign policy, rather than actual cold hard realism.
What do you mean by moral grandstanding and blackmail?
This is about democracy, and we have to stand up for democracy, and all these sort of weasel words that there may be truth behind them, but they don't have any like traction on reality. They don't tell you how to triage between your decisions.
No, I know what you mean. There was a friend of mine was talking about how when he was raising money for Ukraine, there were these women in particular who were, very shit-lib minded, I would say, and they were focused on all of the gay, transgender, human rights, like all these aspects, and they were shoehorning all of that in with defending Ukraine. And I think what that ended up creating in the mind of a lot of people who were against the Biden administration was this link between, wokeness and shitlibness and supporting Ukraine, while looking at Russia as being, like strong like bear, this kind of image, which a lot of people are on the right have. Like, there was not too distant of a time, I recall, when either Trump or somebody in his camp was talking about how, the Russians beat Napoleon and all that that like there tends to be an over elevation of Russian strength when they look at, you know, like this romantic Russian history, which itself is very false. It wasn't the Russians that beat Napoleon, it was the Russian winter that beat Napoleon's troops when they were there. And the Russians themselves, I believe they wouldn't have even been able to beat the Germans in World War II if not for American supplies that were being sent to them. So there has been this over-evaluation of what Russia's capable of. The fact that they've been doing this war for about 3 years now and barely got anything out of it so far, like, it would just really, really suck if all of a sudden we were to say, well, we have to be realists and, you know, allow Russia to take this territory, even if we're not putting any kind of offense at all. I mean, a lot of that money Zelensky was talking about, it hasn't even been sent to Ukraine. You know, a lot of that aid hasn't been sent to Ukraine. So it's like, we're not even trying. We're not even trying, and we're already, you know, going to give up. It doesn't really seem right. I don't know. Erik, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people hate Zelensky, and I totally get that. But he's kind of just like a middle manager and a face for the war, in my view. And I think people back when she was at Statoria, Newlands, you know, she was kind of running it in many ways, and I think people from the U.S. are running it. Although, again, yeah, I think it's kind of, as Sam was saying, these half measures. I think you got to go all in, or you don't get in the first place. On that front. So I think that's also tough. And then, yeah, like, you know, I'm not like a huge like H.W. Bush stan, but, you know, there was wins in the Gulf War. There was wins in Panama, you know, it's kind of based. And there was parades in, you know, wasn't there a parade Times Square, DC, something like, you know, those old shots post World War II, people, you know, dipping their wife and kissing her, or just some girl they met, you know, these are beautiful victories, and I want to bring those victories back to the US, or I hope someone brings those type of victories back to the US. The thing is that, yeah, there's just been so much lying in foreign policy because, yeah, back in the day, the US got in trouble for openly supporting too many coups, I guess, and then they started lying that it was democracy, spreading of democracy, and then that wasn't enough to kind of mobilize people on the streets, and it had to kind of be this like multiracial thing, and then in order to get more people, they're like, actually, let's get the gay thing in there. They just try to get as many people supporting and protesting as possible, and then it just became too much, right? We were trans this and all that, just to try to get as many people to protest against some anti-foreign U.S. interest person as you can. But yeah, I just want to say that person is against the American empire. He sucks, and we're going to get rid of him. And I never believe in a multipolar. When Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, as you were saying, Samuel, that we're maneuvering to a multipolar world, or we already are. I don't accept that at all. And if there's actually polite disagreement with you, Samuel, I think the U.S. absolutely would win a war with China. I think it'd be not fun on either side, and all that. But I think the U.S. just has history with actually has fought things fairly recently, and China hasn't. And it was kind of my whole mindset of this shifted after, because I was kind of like, you know what, Putin going into Ukraine. But then when I saw his and Russia's different than China, but when I saw his army just completely kind of, because post Georgia, he kind of restructured the army to actually imitate the U.S. Army, and he kind of had an army within an army, and they all just completely got crushed pretty quickly by you know, kind of U.S. training since 2014 and weapons and all that. Like, you know, Russia should have been able to take that in a couple months, and they didn't. And then I think these people are such jokes now, particularly Russia. And I think I used to kind of like, oh, you know, I may disagree with Putin, he's opponent, but I have respect. I think he's a fucking joke, and maybe he's as good as Russia can get. But I think Russia would be in a much better position, you know, if it were treated with respect by the American empire, but, you know, kind of folded into the Western civilization.
It's not going to happen unless
well,
Putin
I know,
and the KGB people die.
Didn't treat them with respect. But.
No, it's not even that. The problem is that Gorbachev, who was leading Russia, you know, right into the Soviet Union falling, he did not assassinate, he did not get rid of all the KGB people that were still there. Because back in the day, when it was the Soviet Union, you had kind of a check to the power of the KGB with the Communist Party and vice versa. So it was actually less totalitarian back then during the USSR, you know, save for Stalin, of course. It was less totalitarian than now, because now you don't even have any check to the KGB's power. So the problem isn't so much, you know, Russia as it is the KGB being aligned with Chinese power. And that's something that is going to have to be taken care of. And I don't think any kind of flattery is going to get us anywhere here.
Yeah, I didn't mean flattery. I just mean like the U.S. U.S. kind of raped Russia post-Soviet Union, like bought up all the resources that were owned by the government. And
Not really. Not really. I see what you're saying.
No, well, they did buy it, and then that was, I think, my understanding is that was what kind of led to the rise of Putin, is because London and New York kind of financial interests were buying up these major industries.
What ended up happening afterwards was that Russia and the liberal government that it ended up having in the late 90s ended up paying off any of its debts at that time to the rest of the world. Wow. So it was actually going in a better direction. The problem with Putin back then is that he was not only in the KGB, but it was also kind of a mafia. And he was, for example, selling cocaine that he was buying from the St. Petersburg harbor back when he was deputy mayor at the time. Hilarious. And that was being paid for with the aid money that the United States and Europe were sending Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed. So when we're having this conversation about, oh, Putin, he got rid of these evil oligarchs that were misusing the money. No, he was the evil oligarch and his friends were. He may have gotten rid of certain competitors that he had back then, but as far as...
like British oligarchs, American oligarchs taking those industries. I'm not even talking about the domestic oligarchs, but
which specific oligarchs were taking those industries? Because from my understanding, it was the Russians that were buying up a lot of these resources that were before under control of the USSR.
I believe there was Russian privatization. What was that? Sorry, Samuel?
Well, there was voucher privatization when they privatized industries, and then their currency inflated, and most ordinary Russians got nothing, like jack shit, and then people made off like bandits if they were able to get their money into Luxembourg fast enough.
Yeah, so it wasn't, from my understanding here, international oligarchs. It was specifically Russian oligarchs, like a lot of the friends that were around Putin at the time, like the brothers that he did, the Jewish brothers he did jiu-jitsu with, judo with, the Rothenbergs. It was also people like, Berezovsky and people like... the guy Khodorkovsky, who, after he spent time in jail, because he is, again, like one of those competitors to Putin's gang. Like, he was in his own gang and Putin was in a different gang, and there was like this gang warfare going on. He lost, he went to jail, and now he's like a voice for liberalism, I think like a better kind of liberalism here. But it just goes to show you, like, there were all these different mafias, but I wouldn't necessarily blame America in this case. I think, for example, somebody like George H.W. Bush, he was always afraid of the Soviet Union losing. He wanted there to be the Soviet Union as the devil you knew, rather than the complete loss of it, at least what he was publicly talking about. I think a lot of people in America at the time were kind of feeling that same way, like, oh my God, imagine if the Soviet Union is no more, there's all these nuclear warheads, there's going to be all kinds of trouble here. So I could see that point of view being reflected in what's going on right now, where maybe Trump's administration, doesn't want to risk any kind of nuclear escalation. But again, that goes back to this primordial question of how much are you willing to cede territory to any power that says, I'm going to nuke this territory, if you don't give it to me. Like, where does this end? You see what I mean? Like, that's always going to be here. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that problem? I don't know, Peachy, what do you think?
Well, I think that, I don't know. I'm not like a foreign policy expert. That's not really my main specialty. But I'm not really worried at all about nuclear war with Russia or China invading Taiwan. I think if China was going to invade Taiwan, they would have done it under Joe Biden. And they would definitely not have waited for Donald Trump to be president. And so what that tells me is that they can't invade Taiwan for whatever reason. They just know that it would be incredibly bad for their economy. And I think that China has a lot of hidden problems that we don't even know about. They have their birth rate is basically totally collapsed. Their economy, I think, is much, much worse than people think. I think that they are in no position to be waging some war against America. That's just not going to happen. And if they did, we would easily win. And I feel the same with Russia. These are two countries who are basically half broken, frankly. And they look strong from the outside, but I think they're paper tigers. And I think that but we're rapidly getting much stronger. And I don't think anyone is gonna mess with us under Donald Trump. That's like his sort of secret sauce. He comes to power. There's no more wars. He's able to negotiate all of these ends. The Ukraine war is about to end, and it will end peacefully. with a negotiated settlement between those two countries. He just got that hostage back, which, by the way, I never even knew we had an American school teacher stuck in a prison in Russia for 4 years. I had no idea. That was just not mentioned in the media, but he came home last night. That's pretty cool. And we didn't have to send a pallet of, $5 billion to Moscow to get him back, like Obama.
But we don't know what the exchange was yet.
Yeah, so yes, we do. It was
It
was a cyber attacker. It was an exchange.
The way they communicated made it seem like there was more to the exchange that they didn't disclose.
Maybe there's settlement agreements for the war. But my point is, the main enemy, the reason what people are most afraid of and why they did vote for Donald Trump is a third enemy that I think people kind of overlook, which is the enemy that DOGE is fighting right now. And Elon Musk
the enemy within.
is the general in that war. I am much more threatened personally. My family is much more threatened personally every single day by the deep state bureaucracy. And I have a pseudonym for a reason. Okay. There was like from 2016 till I came out with my face like in 2023. I was actually afraid for my life living in Los Angeles under that regime. Sorry, that's just true. And it's true for anyone who was on the right, who tried to wear like a MAGA hat walking down the street. And that was just like the low-level shock troops who wanted to like throw eggs at your car or beat you up in public or whatever. But then the higher ups, the bureaucracy, wanted to literally throw people in prison who were on the right. They wanted to throw memers in prison, and they did. And they tried to do that with Catholics. And I'm a, practicing Catholic.
And debanking as well.
All of it, the whole regime and on Twitter, the old regime, you guys know, I got Peachy Keenan is like my third account or fourth even, because all the others were banned. Okay. That was just a thing that would happen. You guys know. So the real enemy to me and my children and my sons and my kids has been this like woke regime that was enforcing DEI in college applications, which we were deeply affected by, which affects basically every element of our lives. So that's the enemy that DOGE and Elon are fighting. And so I am just like cheering them, and I'm like going to throw rose petals at their feet, because I really do feel like they are the invading army that we have been waiting for. And once we can take them down, or at least stop them or whatever they're doing, then we can deal with everything else. But nothing else is as important to me in terms of like, grave enemies.
I agree with you about a lot of this stuff. It is a horrible thing that's occurred for a lot of people who are Trump supporters, who are against a lot of the rabid leftism that was going around, and hopefully this is on its way out. At the same time, if I imagine enemies of the West, what they're thinking, they also think that it would be good to encourage Americans to only focus on solving these problems, while at the same time allowing for their own machinations to occur in the background. We do have, as far as the amount of Americans in the world, it's not just you, me, and, Erik and Samuel here. There are a lot more Americans. There are a lot more minds that could be put to use in fighting a war on two fronts, not because that's what we want, but that's because I don't really see any other way out of it. So let's say, for example, that there is this peace deal that occurs, Putin agrees to it, and at the same time, there's not going to be any NATO, there's not going to be any Article 5. What is to stop Russia from, like I said before, rearming, getting more people prepped to fight a war, breaking this promise, much like they broke the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine had to give up its nukes in exchange for this, promise of Russia never to invade. And then imagine Trump's not going to be president forever. At a certain time, he's going to step down. So let's say in 4 years, and then 4 years later, we have a much stronger Russia and, aided by China, that's now going to start steamrolling into Ukraine and beyond. That's what I don't want to have happen. And it seems like we do have enough minds if they were to also focus on not just these things that you were talking about, Peachy, which are extremely important, but also that aspect of it, then it will be good. But I'm not really seeing it from a lot of the MAGA-oriented media. It seems like they are more in the favor of, well, this is Europe, this is, Russia, Ukraine, let them figure it out, not really thinking several steps ahead here. So I don't know, what do you guys think?
I'm not worried about Russia. I am worried about China. China has spent the last decade militarizing their economy. They have they have stockpiles for like months and months of food and energy in the event of war and their supply chains being blockaded. They're building landing bridges for a blockade on Taiwan. They've been cutting undersea cables. They have, in their meta narrative 2049 to reunify the two countries, but really they have until they have this decade, because Xi Jinping is not getting any younger. There's a potential that we're a few years away from like artificial general intelligence leading to some like decisive strategic advantage, whoever gets there first. The most important island in the world for that is Taiwan and TSMC. They are doing everything to telegraph that they're about to invade. Meanwhile, we have folks like Darren Beattie being chosen to join the State Department to lead public diplomacy, and he's on the record as saying that Taiwan is part of China, and they may treat their Uyghurs bad, but not as bad as we treat white Americans. So like there's this idea that they would rather invade under Biden than under Trump, I think is farcical. Like Trump is more of a wild card, right? Because there are definitely factions within the Republican Party who want to do strong deterrence and make Taiwan a porcupine. But Trump at the end of the day is very transactional, and he seems also very motivated by like not having dead bodies in the water, right? He seems deeply affected by death, and his obsession of avoiding World War III is in part because he wants to prevent a conflict. But should one break out, I don't think he's going to commit U.S. lives to defend another country. In Russia's case, I totally reject the narrative that this is like the first stage towards like a broader march across Eastern Europe. I think this was part of a kind of game of chicken where they loaded up all these troops on the border, and then we kind of called their bluff and did things to undermine a settlement. And then at that point, you have to prove your commitment, follow through. And then they, in a Donald Rumsfeld fashion, totally miscalculated how hard it would be.
Wait, what is that noise? Is that from you, Samuel, or for somebody else?
It's someone's dog.
Yeah,
my dog is barking. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. While the dog is barking, could you please mute? Just just mute your microphone over here, and there we go. So, Erik, when it comes to the assessment that Samuel had, any thoughts there? Because I'm not really seeing this consensus that a lot of people have had regarding Russia being like the bear that was provoked over here by all these various countries joining NATO and all that. Keep in mind, like, Russia was invading Georgia way before in 2008. I don't think that the country of Russia that somebody like Bush, H.W. Bush, who was giving these promises of not expanding NATO allegedly, I don't think that took into account what Russia ended up becoming afterwards. Because again, countries change, regimes change, and I don't know, Erik, what do you make of this when it comes to what Samuel said?
Yeah, I know Darren pretty well, and I have this debate with him all the time, which is I believe in a based American empire. And then, he says, he publicly tweets this, he goes, tell me America would be worse off if for white Americans, if China were to rule it, and all that, which I completely disagree with. I think it would be a worse place for all Americans, including ones that have a Swedish background like me, if you couldn't tell. And I think Taiwan's the line, and you can't, I think that needs to be a line. It needs to be clear. And, porcupine would be a nice way to put it. And I think you meant it as a nice way to put it. I think make it much more as extreme deterrence as possible. And Trump is a dove. And everything, and he is a dove, even though he doesn't look like it. Like, he's loud, he's got the deep voice, and he's a big guy, but he's a dove. And I think there are pros to that, and then there's cons to that. And also, George W. Bush, I think, gave foreign interventions a pretty bad reputation, and everything. And also people confuse the war that he did. With the occupation. Like, the war we won was very quick and well done. But the occupation, he fucked it up, I think. And then, I think he said, was it in Iraq or was it Afghanistan or something? He said, that they dictated policy that 1/3 of parliament needed to all be women or something. And then they think women are dogs there, which I completely disagree with. But at the time, and I still think maybe today, but definitely at the time, U.S. Congress didn't even have 1/3 of women. So, there was just completely a fucked up occupation after a really well executed war. So I think that, foreign interventions have just been, are surrounded by lies that it's for helping them, definitely not helping us. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's not about helping us, America. And I think, if you have honesty, this is an American interest that we're doing. And American interest is also a term. This is for the United States. This is for Americans. Let's give soldiers land in these places. Did. That would be my point of view, and have a lot more honesty in foreign policy and make it actually applicable to, when we're taking oil or rare earth minerals similar to Alaska, there should be maybe a citizen dividend with that. I think making empire building honest while making it worthwhile, not just for American major corporations, but making it worthwhile for American citizens, where they're seeing money, they're seeing land, and they're seeing good of it, then I think that's a much better way to do it. But in regards to China, I think that they're prepping to take Taiwan. I think they'll probably wait till after Trump, on that front. I don't think they'll do it in the next 4 years. We'll see. I may be wrong. I think that they're going to try to, back channel, probably literally through Darren Beatty.
Darren can do it.
Well, I think Darren will definitely be in Trump's ear saying give away Taiwan. So we'll see if Darren can do it. I don't know. I don't agree with that, but Darren will be on it for sure.
So then, in your point of view, if we look 10 years or 20 years into the future here, which I know is a long time, but what are certain things that we may be seeing if Trump ends up having this dove policy when it comes to all these countries? Because I don't think they're just going to sit back and chill out. So I don't know, Erik, what are your predictions there?
Well, I don't want to take up the whole conversation, although I'm sure selfishly maybe I would, but to answer it quickly, I think that the U.S. will be America will be the world will be a little bit more of a multipolar order in the next 4 years, and that might cause the world to be a little bit more multipolar after the next 4 years. But we'll see who wins. Maybe, you never know. There could be another, again, I think the January 6th stuff was overblown. I'm glad all those people were pardoned, to be honest. But there could be even another January 6th, and then you get a Nikki Haley in 2028, right? Like, I'm just saying, and then she's, I think, bad on domestic policy, and I think is overly aggressive on foreign policy, but that over-aggression on foreign policy will lead to a little bit more of a unipolar U.S. dominated world. And it's shitty because the only people that kind of believe in, I believe in my level of aggression, are literally the worst people. And I hate that there's maybe some crossover there, because I think that there's a balance of populism and a great domestic policy portfolio, and then having not only foreign interventionism, but honesty in foreign interventionism, which Nikki Haley does not have. She always, it's about democracy, and it's just a poor, ChatGPT, write me a poor man's Reagan speech, please, and make it dumb. That's what she would say. But there's a line there where you can have a populist domestic policy and an even populist, honest empire building policy, which I agree with. And it's rare to find people that kind of have both those points of view, which again, I argue with Darren Beatty about. I debate that with Mike Benz. Mike Benz is a little bit more receptive to my argument. Darren's not. But yeah.
Well, going back to what we talked about with these potentialities here, I know that you can't really predict anything that would happen here, but if we were to just imagine these countries like the Baltics, for instance, preparing their defenses right now for what will inevitably come from Russia, in their opinion. Do you guys, like Peachy and Samuel, do you guys think that this may be overblown, that Russia just wants to take as much as it can of Ukraine, and then it's going to settle for peace, and it's going to be all good from here on in? We're not going to have to, like, all these European countries are just being too superstitious about building up their defenses.
I don't think it's going to be all good, but I think there is this, Eastern and especially in the Baltics, like this mindset that Russia just wants to rebuild the empire and like bring back the good old times. And Putin's hour-long lectures don't help that impression, but they just don't. Russia just does not have the capability to do that. They're running out of people, for one. Like, they're having to import all these mercenaries from like Chechnya and Africa and places. Trump makes a good point.
That's right now. Just to be clear, we're not talking about now. We're talking about after this hypothetical peace where it gets a chance to rearm.
Yeah, if we're talking about 4 or 5 or even longer, like years from now, that's through the singularity, as far as I'm concerned. It's hard to know, like, what will the world even look like at that point. And I'm most concerned about like navigating that transition. You talk about like population collapse. Russia also has this problem. Ukraine has this problem. Like, if it came down to a world where we had 2 choices, either there's some peaceful ascension of Taiwan into China, 2 governments, 1 system, or 2 systems, 1 government, whatever, or like they bomb all their ports preemptively and like TSMC is destroyed, and there's like, cities are Taipei is leveled, and we win some Pyrrhic victory as the defenders of democracy. But then on the other hand, like, we don't have the computer chips we need to like cure all the diseases. Like, I know which I would rather pick, right? Today I want to defend Taiwan. I want to forestall that eventuality, but I recognize this as like the core choke point in human history. Like, if we survive these next 5 years, it will be a golden age. Like, we're going to have robot nannies and mass automated factories. That
sounds a bit hell-like as well, depending on how people.
No
use
robot nannies. Sorry.
No, not
you don't have to
Jetsons.
buy one, but
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, and I remember the Jetsons. They had that robot nanny, but no, I see.
No, she was the housekeeper. I am pro robot housekeeper doing the dishes.
Robot housekeeper, robot cook.
Not nursing your baby.
But separate from like the consumer applications, we're also going to have like incredible autonomous weapons that give us like a decisive advantage in all these wars and let us win these wars without committing human beings.
Yeah, I mean, just like The Simpsons were talking about all the wars being fought by robots in that one episode. No, I understand what you're saying. Where I am going to push back, though, is, again, about the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, with Russia not talking about it. So other than, like, these countries preparing their defenses, like the Baltics, there were also things, for example, like Putin said that Poland must be reminded that its western territories were a gift from Stalin, in reference to the claim that Poland, wants to take a Ukrainian territory. And then there is also the decree that Putin signed, I believe it was signed this year, 2024, where it allocated funds for the search, registration, and legal protection of Russian property abroad, including like in Alaska, for instance. So there's like so many of these different things. So Medvedev was talking about the war with the U.S. being unavoidable unless they give up Alaska. He also claimed that the Baltic countries belong to Russia. He also said there will always be a chance for another conflict between Russia and Ukraine after the current war ends. And there is also the Russian general Andrei Mordvichev was talking about how this war is going to last a long time because we still need to liberate Eastern Europe. And the last thing, which I think is very important, and it's not really something that Americans realize, the way that Putin's mind works has to do also with the information that he gets from Russian state TV. So the Russian state TV is not made so much for only the people, but it's made more so for Putin himself, or it becomes like a snake eating its own tail. Like, he watches the Russian state TV, which tells him things that he himself loves to hear about, how the Russian Empire should expand, and then he kind of does that. So, it's like a closed loop kind of thing. And I don't think people in the West take a lot of that stuff into account. Maybe they look at Putin and look at like Russian people think, oh, they're just like us. They look like us. Why wouldn't they be reasonable? Why wouldn't Putin settle for a reasonable deal? So a lot of these things, when you piece them together, it does not look good as far as in the future, Russia, just staying put, not going anywhere else. It seems like they are going to use any amount that they can, of Western coalescence to keep going. I wish that was not the case. I wish you were right, but I'm not really seeing that. So before we get to the singularity, I don't think it makes sense not to focus on these possibilities as being something like really, possible here. So I don't know. Any pushback on that?
I wish we could like figure out how to bet on this, but I think Trump is a dove, but he's not a pacifist, right? And he's one of the first to arm Ukraine. I think he believes in kind of escalate to de-escalate strategy if negotiations fell through. A lot of his sort of saber rattling on exiting NATO is really seems like 5D chess to try to get Europe to actually pay its own way and build up their own defenses. On the other hand, I think there's a kind of Girardian mimesis going on where Victoria Nuland still thinks it's 1980 and Putin still thinks it's 1980, and this is just not the axis over which the world turns anymore. And there's a kind of path dependency where we've over-indexed all our foreign service officers and all our strategic investments into the former Soviet Union and into defending Central Europe, because that's where the inertia was. And it's very similar political economy in Russia, where it's still, we both have illusions of being great powers when we're much less great than we used to be.
Yeah, I think that goes for both, but I don't know if it goes for America to that large an extent, because it seems like a lot of the people who are in America, like in the armed services, I think that they may have been, and you guys could tell me if I'm wrong here, I think that they were hamstrung for a long time by a lot of these bureaucratic woke policies, and otherwise they are just as capable as they were of, projecting American power. So it's like we were Gulliver that was tied down by all these little Lilliputians, and all it would take for us is just to, just get back up. Get back up on our feet, and I don't know if these other competing powers would really stand any kind of a chance as long as America does project its power rather than listening to certain silver-tongued podcasters and media people talking about how we should coalesce to whatever Russia wants. I mean, I don't know.
They're not going to do that. But if you really want this, and this is why I still, I don't call myself a Trump supporter because I'm Canadian. First of all, so it's not really my business, but I'm happy Trump won, and one of the reasons is, despite all these trade-offs I'm trying to outline, his ejection of Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo from the Republican coalition is symbolic of a subterranean battle between Lockheed Martin and Anduril, right? And we need less Lockheed Martin and a lot more Anduril.
Yeah, right.
What is Anduril?
It's a defense startup. Palmer Luckey's, they build the killer drones. They have a new factory opening in Ohio that's going to get mass production by 2027, and Palmer talks about that being a very urgent timeline. And Russia has hypersonic missiles that could take out our carriers like that. They don't have much of a domestic economy outside of Moscow, but they have weapons and conventional weapons. China has enormous production capacity, and what won us World War II was not our tanks. It was the fact that we had a mass manufacturing economy to build the tanks, and China has that now, and will supply those arms to Russia. So we need to modernize our defense industrial base, and the only way to do that is to do a DOGE audit of the Pentagon, and kick out the defense primes, because the woke stuff is just the veneer, right? Yeah. During the pandemic, the DoD took over a year to develop their own K95 mask, right? They're not a fast-moving organization.
There's a lot of bloat, is what you're saying, that needs to be gotten rid of in order for the military-industrial complex to actually function for the sake of America, as opposed to for lining the pockets of a lot of these bureaucrats. So, yeah, I could definitely see something like that working out. I don't know, though, when it comes to Russia's hypersonic missiles, why didn't they just use it to blow up Kyiv? Why didn't they just use it to win the war? It's been 3 years. They have these hypersonic missiles. What's going on?
Well, they used one recently, and it was the first time they used it, and it was reported as sort of them showing that they now have this capability online. Where hypersonics are most decisive is for aircraft carriers, and if they took out a U.S. aircraft carrier, that would be World War III. So
that definitely would.
Bombing a city with it.
They're using donkeys now, they're using camels. It doesn't seem like the projection of Russia to the West is in line with the kind of power that they've been showing here. So what's going on? Are they intentionally holding it back for future use, or it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me?
I mean, they just demonstrated them. They're not really applicable to like bombing a city. You can use regular missiles for that. And they just bombed Kiev like a day or two ago. So.
Yeah, but as far as any other kind of missiles that they have, if you're saying that these hypersonics are not really good of a use case for the cities, then does that mean that whatever else they have is not enough to bomb these cities? Because again, like if I were Putin, I would just be bombing all the missiles I possibly could on all of these Ukrainian cities, yet it seems to be very selective. So either they're intentionally holding back for some reason while the meat grinder continues to consume, all these Russian people that end up getting drafted, or what? Do you see what I mean? Like that does not make a lot of sense to me.
I think it's fair to say that Russia has shown some restraint in how they've wedged this.
Very interesting. I don't know. Erik, do you agree with the restraint part? And if so, then why?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of game theory going on. I think I would also say that there's some restraint because there's also an equal opposite reaction from the US and the West. And I think there was a lot of calculation. Is Trump going to win? Can they make a deal? Rather before it getting even more extreme. I think the election had, I literally think that was one of the biggest impacts. Not even like the day it happening, obviously that's a huge impact, but the lead up to it, if Trump would win, why there maybe have been more restraint. And then, yeah, exactly as Samuel says, Trump has if negotiations fall through, Trump very much has an escalate in order to de-escalate, which I find is actually, just in life and in business, kind of what you have to do sometimes with opponents. But yeah, I think that there is game theory going on, and I think Trump winning or the potential of Trump winning had so much to do with it.
Well, what I definitely do like is him wanting to make a deal with the Ukrainians where he's going to acquire certain minerals from Ukraine. That, I think, is a step forward because in a way that does tie Ukraine to America much more financially speaking here. Like, I really don't have any kind of problem with that. But again, going back to this idea of Ukraine being taken over by Russia by now, if they were capable of doing it. I understand what you mean about not wanting to escalate, but if you were a country that was trying to take over another country, would you really hold back your power level for 3 years all this time? Like, that to me just doesn't make sense.
I think that I think their military, like I said, after Georgia, they reformatted their military to kind of mimic more America's military. Then they had a military to the military, and that got just completely decimated on that front. I get your argument about missiles and everything, but yeah, I think that there's a balance where they thought that they could win it this way, and then yeah, it's now meat grinder. I think they thought they could maybe that first couple of years win it. But then it's election time. Let's wait to see if we can negotiate. And ultimately, I think Putin is not the strong man, as people think he is. I think he's a boomer. I think a lot of the places that like these people don't go for the whole thing, these boomers. And I think that, and you see a lot in what I think that Russia funds in Western European political parties. They don't fund like the AfD. They fund like some dumb boomer party. So the AfD controls a lot of East Germany, or has the most inroads there. I believe Russia's funding this kind of old school kind of, what maybe people think of 2016 Bernie Sanders, but even older school. There's George Galloway in the UK. I think he's funded by Russia through proxy. So, and then these people are not right wing people; they're openly left wing, and then they're like LaBase, or not even LaBase. Like I'm like the left wing hardcore, and I go, why do they do that? Why not just give money to the bait? Like when I used to think like I liked Putin, I was like, why doesn't he give money? But then you realize that these are just boomers running this former KGB operation, and they don't have the guts to go do. This is why I love Gen Z, because I'm Gen Z. I'm 26. is there's just the Gen Z people. I've talked with this, even one of my friends, he ran, I think one of the most, you would not know him, but you would know the campaign he did. And he ran one of the most different, unique campaigns. And they won this impossible race. And he's this early 20-something, he's younger than me, he's 23, I think now. And we talk about when Gen Z reaches kind of the age to be powerful in the United States, it's gonna, like, 2000, people thought 2008 Obama was like visceral and emotional and big thinking. People thought Trump 2016, big emotional, big thinking, or Trump now. It's going to be nothing in comparison when Gen Z gets into power, because I think that Gen Z is full of extremists. And I think we're all wired on TikTok and IG Reels and Vine, where we have no patience for anything and we want to get things done. And that's how I feel. And that's how I know a lot of my non-political friends feel that are on the left or on the right. I think that it's going to be a whole new world coming up. Sometimes I forget the original question, so sorry if I do the weed.
No, that is very important, though, because we do have the benefit, for those who like reading, of knowing if history is repeating or not, because we did have, the Italian futurists back in the early 20th century who wanted to tear all the old institutions down. Now it's going to be electric and it's going to be fast. And, it seems like maybe there's going to be a similar thing with Gen Z and onwards. Maybe they'll have Sonic the Hedgehog as their official, mascot, because they want to speed everything up and make everything efficient. But
gotta go fast.
You got to go fast, exactly. But when it comes to AFD, though, what I was able to find is that people like Peter Bryson, who was a AFD member of the Bundestag, he was investigated in April 24 for allegedly receiving 20,000 euros from Russian sources during a meeting in Prague. And also Maximilian Krah, another AFD politician, faced allegations of receiving payments from Russia. So I don't know, like the AFD, at least in terms of its policies, does seem to be very pro-Russia, but it doesn't mean that Russia is only funding them. Like you said, it funds a lot of like these Greece, green beatnik people, like the anti-nuclear power people, because that way, if Germany doesn't have nuclear power, it's going to be way, way, way more dependent on Russia. But that does, in a way, go back to the original topic of DOGE and Musk here, because if we're talking about dependency, how much is it of importance for somebody like Elon Musk to have that factory in China, where even if he is pro-America, certain things may just tie his hands in terms of doing something, or in terms of even paying attention to it? Because if you have so much invested in China, then it would be a lot likelier that you're going to look the other way, should China start doing some bad stuff. So I don't know, like Samuel, Peachy, what do you guys think?
I have thoughts, but Peachy hasn't said anything.
Yeah, Peachy, unmute yourself now, and let's see. Even if the dog's there, I don't care.
Yeah, sorry, my dogs have been barking furiously at someone outside. Sorry.
No problem. You should bring him here, by the way. I'd love to see him.
I have a 240-pound English Mastiff, so he's not very portable.
No, there should be a way for you to call the Mastiff here, because that would be amazing in the future. I'm just saying. Okay, but anyway.
All right, you got it. What was your question?
So my question had to do with, even if even if Elon is pro-America, wants America to succeed, the fact that you have somebody like him being heavily invested with this factory in China, wouldn't that just tie somebody's hands to a great extent from doing something should China start to, be naughtier than it already is?
No, I mean, why? That's like, I don't even get it.
Well, because you have money in it. If you have money in China and China starts doing bad things, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to come down on China, and it would be a lot easier for, making some excuses and, because that way you don't end up losing money.
I don't think so. I think he has enough money that if he had to, let's say, cut his ties to China, I think he would be willing to support America. I mean, and the thing is, because he has ties in China, as do every single other American corporation on earth, including every European corporation, the whole world has a connection to China, okay? No, Amazon, Google, everything. So it behooves everyone, especially including Elon, but all of them, to make sure that there isn't trouble with China. Like that's the number one, their number one political goal. We're not going to go down that road. And so I think that the number one goal is to fix the problem, which seems to be the only real problem, which is that for some reason, all of American interests in Asia come down to this tiny little island 6,000 miles off the coast of California that somehow everything in America relies on and depends on, and our whole economy, and we're all going to die without the Taiwanese superconductor factories. We're all going to be, that's it for us. It's over. We're back to the Stone Age. And the decision to have that happen, that is 6,000 miles away, and there's no like redundant system, there's no backup, there's no plan B. It's just this tiny little island, an inch from China, all that way across. We have to spend all this worry about this little dot. It's so stupid. Like, how did this situation? I don't know the history about backstory. Okay, I know there's a whole thing, but reasons it happened, and that's so dumb. And I know that. I mean, the number one goal of the United States must be to make Taiwan not an issue. That's the only way to avoid this in the end. And I know that we're building and there's factory technology you can't do here. It's very hard, whatever. Okay, fine. But like, until we can solve that, I don't know, move the shit to Greenland. Like, I don't know. Why isn't it here? Move it. Gaza can be the new Taiwan, right?
I mean, that may be a little bit riskier too, with the Middle East around it. No, I see your point, Peachy. You're right that it's really, really dumb. It's really dumb to have to rely on a country that's around like this whole hot zone of possibilities, very bad possibilities. Right. Just like we were relying on the N95 masks, coming from China, and just like we're relying on China in general for a lot of this cheap crap that we import. So in that sense, I am kind of happy about Trump's focus on having there be more factories in America, more production. Because it does seem to be unbalanced right now, where you have a lot of people who are, American citizens that are, on a lot of drugs. They're on fentanyl, by the way, imported by the Chinese, and we have them not working. But here's the other question. This kind of ties into the whole immigration thing as well, which I'm glad we're able to kind of get into here. When it comes to the kind of jobs that Americans are willing to do, there has been this idea that certain jobs like the maid, rather than the robot maid, you have a maid from Guatemala or whatever, those are not going to be the jobs that second, third, fourth generation Americans will ever do. That's the idea. I don't know if that's correct, if that's a correct assumption or not. Maybe you could say, well, they're not being paid enough, but is that even possible? Is it even possible to have a society where the people who end up doing, like the landscaping and the maid work, that they would not be from these countries where it would be a lot more acceptable for them to be paid on the cheap? Could we have a society like that?
We use guest visas. This is just, again, another like straw man issue, because there's guest worker visas that you can use to bring in. Right. Okay. There you go. I don't know if you can like mow my lawn, but okay, I'll let you in. You're Canadian. You don't get to come in. Just kidding. We
I'm
can use
here.
guest worker. You're in. Okay. Guest worker visas. I mean, to clean all the hotel rooms in Las Vegas, and all the nannies at the park that I see. I mean, okay, they're probably illegal. Let's be honest. But I mean, there's a way around, all or nothing in terms of like low skilled labor.
So you're talking about like the system they use in Singapore, right? And in the Middle East, they have a similar one.
No, we use it now for picking crops in California. When you see the picker on the 101 picking the fruit in Ventura, those are guest workers.
The problem with this is countries like Canada. Canada has had too much immigration recently and it's caused a backlash. But we don't have any. We have very or almost no illegal immigration. That's a very uniquely American phenomenon. And the reason for that is partly because of these guest worker programs. Most people who immigrate illegally to America don't cross the border. They come here on a guest worker visa and then overstay their visa and then hide. And like countries of sensible immigration enforcement, like Canada, have very strong employer-based enforcement. You're not going to get E-Verify from this government because the ag lobby is too strong. Or we have the visas that we do give out are all permanent in some way, or all lead to a green card, so that we don't have this overstay problem. And so there is a trade-off here.
That's a very fair point on the ag lobby and exactly what you said, but it's all going to become a moot point anyways when you have robotics. Yeah, like you said, I think in absolutely less than 5 years, and then robots will do the jobs Latinos and Mexicans just won't do, and everything. And then what happens at that point? And then I think that's a good thing, because I think then the ag lobby will be like, E-Verify, who gives a shit? Do what you want. Maybe I'm wrong in that assumption, but It's all going to become a moot point once robots that are able to work almost 24/7, with very reasonably short charging times, and everything, where one goes in and charges and plugs in like the Borg, if we go back into Star Trek references, and one goes out, and then and it becomes like a ChatGPT API cost, where it's literally too cheap to meter in a way, the cost of manning these robots. And I think that the too cheap to meter thing will be a more 10-15 year thing, but a less than 5-year thing will be Peachy is a baddie. Peachy is a baddie. So thank you for putting that up.
You.
So you're welcome.
Very
but
nice.
It's all a mute point. And then what do you do with let's say all these people were here legally, and not even the illegal immigrant deport argument aside, what do you do with tens of millions of people that their jobs were farming, and now they can't make money? So it's not even what do low-level lawyers do where AI replaces them? What do tens of millions of Latinos and Mexicans and maybe there's a random Swedish person working on the farm for whatever reason illegally, or anything? What do you do with them? I don't know. When they can't make money, what are they going to do?
There's another thing. I mean, that's definitely an issue. What happens to people who don't have work because of AI, but both white collar and blue collar. But there's another issue where I am happy to see robots do these horrible, very grueling menial jobs, like mining. The whole industry of mining is terrifying to me. Just coal mining, and whether it's in Western Pennsylvania 100 years ago, or children now, mines should be robots. There are certain jobs that it's almost immoral to ask a human even to do. For example, I hate factory farming, but right now we have it, and we have these meat processing plants, and the work in a meat processing plant, which is basically exclusively staffed by illegal immigrants, even by children. And just the stories I've read about what that work is like is so brutal. It's so horrifying. It's and I can't believe it's happening in 2025. It feels like it's something from the Victorian England. People are losing limbs, fingers. It's so gruesome. And it's just soul killing to be there, killing all of these animals. And it's just very bloody, and sounds like something that no human being should do. It's just, if we have an alternative, I'm happy to outsource all those jobs to the creatures who don't have feelings and souls. That's fine. But yes, what do you do with people who don't? That was the only thing they could do. I don't have the solution for that one. Maybe if Dr. Fauci has a new virus for everyone that will depopulate and take care of
the No. Here's the thing, though. If people want to live in a certain level of civilization or society where they would have a lot more fun living in that way, there could be in the future enclaves for people where, maybe somewhere in the tropical forest or whatever, if people want to live more in a tribalistic lifestyle, that could be possible. Or certain towns that are not as technological, because I don't want people to have to rely on being part of this matrix grid where everything is interconnected and they're constantly being watched if they don't want to. So I imagine that there would be different strokes for different folks in the future, and we will have people who are I don't know, Peachy, are you going to take the brain chip, or are you going to take the Neuralink?
No, I don't. Well, I might need it. I'm a little retarded. Maybe I do need it, but I actually think I have a family member who had a spinal cord injury. So he's not paralyzed or anything, but he has really intense chronic pain. He had a back surgery. It failed. So he's in basically constant pain. And the thing is, he's been hoping, because Elon Musk mentioned this, because Elon Musk also has severe back pain, that he will invent some kind of Neuralink implant, something into the spine to help people deal with chronic pain. There's incredible applications for this technology. I have no problem with the Neuralink. I don't think it's going to turn us into zombies. I think, TikTok might, but I'm not worried about Neuralink.
It's a problem of will, though, because if you have a device, let's say, obviously not for the example you're talking about with your friend with the spinal problem, but if you just have somebody who, for example, let's take Ozempic, for instance. With Ozempic, people don't have to use their willpower not to eat. And as a result, if you have a society where most of the actions they do is governed by this robot as opposed to utilizing their will to do these things, would that not create a deterioration of society to the point where people cease to be human at all? they cease to have human agency, and as a result, there's nothing there anymore.
Well, part of that is not giving children robot nannies to look up to.
Sure, I agree.
We have to stay human in the household, absolutely. But I'm not worried about that kind of thing. But I am worried about.
It'll be the new.
What's that?
Humans only in the household. I'm not kidding. Like, no. It's like whether you support that or not. Like I agree. You know,
I disagree. I have 5 children, and I do want a kitchen slave.
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, yes.
I think you know, I'm anti-slavery. But when I watch like the old the Merchant Ivory movies about like old England, and there's like a scullery maid, and the like middle class housewife had her like housekeeping staff. Like, how do that's what I want.
Or the Flintstones, where you have dinosaurs, you know, doing things for you, including the toilet, probably, which is a horrible thing to think about, you know. Like,
I sometimes joke that like if you want a picture of a post-scarcity society, like what will the world look like after AGI? Look to Qatar, look to Saudi Arabia. These are places that are building, you know, mega projects in the deserts and like import all these guest workers to build their stadiums, which are essentially robots from their point of view. Like that's what.
And by the way, they all kind of suck. If I'm being honest here, like a lot of these buildings, they're in really, really bad taste. And look, I appreciate MBS, you know, going all out and, you know, trying different things here, but he does not come from the, you know, culture, you know, that created the Notre Dame Cathedral, that created all of these beautiful things that are still with us. So if he's just investing in these dumb-looking, you know, glass things, it's like, who cares? Like, this is not something that resonates with humanity. This is something that's, you know, it's dumb. But I don't know, like, that's the other problem here. If we don't use human willpower to create art and to create something that people resonate with, then we're just going to live in this weird technocratic hellscape where our architecture is going to be demoralizing.
Well,
Trump signed an executive order.
There's one reason that Notre Dame got built, and it wasn't just, you know, human willpower. There was something else. Something else motivating the builders behind the great cathedrals of Europe, and behind all the great art of, like, you know, Western Christianity, Western civilization. And so I think the further we get from that, things are going to look a little more sterile.
But that is also an interesting question to consider, right? Because you have the old school Christians, you know, who were worshiping in caves, who didn't really need to build a lot of these really beautiful cathedrals. And then obviously you had, you know, the Renaissance, and you had the Counter-Reformation, where you got all these brilliant artists to contribute, as well as, you know, allegedly, you know, you had the Knights Templar getting certain pieces of information about, you know, how to make these beautiful architectural marvels, you know, back in the Crusade days. So the reason I'm saying all this is that I'm not sure how much of this was just Christianity, although I do agree that as a society we are kind of like running on the fumes of Christianity as far as how we see the world. But even as far as what Christianity is, you should really talk, all of you guys, with my friend Gnostic Informant one of these days. His take is that a lot of these things came about from Plato. And that Plato started to ask the question of, like, what exactly is the good, and how can we create the kind of society that isn't just going to take these arbitrary instructions from these gods like Zeus that rape women and do all kinds of horrible things, you know, because that was the mindset back during that time with these gods. It could be argued, though, that a lot of the pagans around the time of Christianity, they were also going against the human sacrifices that were done, and they were saying, like, why would we do this horrible stuff? Like, already you had people like Cicero and so on and so forth. You had all these, you know, ancient Roman philosophers that were like waking up and saying, like, why are we doing all this? And I think that at that point, that is something, you know, whether or not you would believe in Jesus Christ, that is something that gave people a broader scope to look at. I'm not necessarily seeing it to the same extent in places that you could say, like, embrace Christianity without a lot of this philosophy in it. So I do think that philosophy plays a really big role, because there's like half of Africa's Christian, and they're not really building these cathedrals.
Ethiopia has some cool stuff, but it's also got that medieval.
Yeah, it's like Ethiopia is interesting, but you see my point, though, right? Like, not to go off on the tangent here.
Yeah,
I don't.
I've always liked the Mormon aesthetic, the kind of techno-futurist Norman Rockwell, but
I don't
I'm not
know.
a Christian.
Some of the Mormon things, they look a little bit Scientology like. They look a little bit
Yeah.
tacky.
Yes, they do.
They're
Horrible.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you said it. That's fine. But
So I think
yeah.
what's going on here is like it's similar to the contrast between like mainline Protestantism and like Orthodox, where there's kind of like American Protestantism is much more personal revelation, personal relationship. God is very abstract, and that leads to kind of like a kind of aesthetic approach to architecture, where it's very barren, very abstract, versus like Orthodox, very ornate, very liturgical, very embodied, and the same way that like wokeism is potentially a kind of hyper Christian, pathological version of Christianity. There's like that has also happened in our
Christians
elite.
were the original SJWs, you could say, back in the day.
Not
St.
Paul
was
was
Christianity, but they were focused a lot on, like, it was, from what I researched, a lot of rich Romans, like the children of Roman aristocrats, that started embracing Christianity because it was considered to be woke back in the day, and it was their way of rebelling against their pagan, staunch parents. And they were all about, like, we have to help the poor, we have to, like the poor and the meek shall inherit the earth. So they were against a lot of the, you could say, organization that, kind of melded together with that aspect later on in the Middle Ages, because you did have, Christian hospitals and places where people were able to be treated, but you wouldn't be able to have all of that without the order that was around it. Like if it was just Christians living in caves, it wouldn't really be the same thing. Like you need to have that Apollonian sense of order in order to make society go. And that kind of does bring us back to this question of what exactly is America under DOGE fighting to be? Because I don't think are just living for the sake of, consuming food and having sex. And, there has to be a deeper meaning to what it means. Oh, I know, Erik, that's fine. But there has to be a deeper meaning to what it means to be an American, assuming things work out really well with DOGE. We're able to cut all this fat. The last thing that I'm going to ask you guys, what do you personally see as the future of America? Go, Erik, starting with you.
I mean, I think that with, kind of post-scarcity world, you can go do whatever you want. In the same way you have like a WooCommerce, Squarespace type website builder, you'll have that for factories and building products and everything. So I think that the idea guy wins in the end, in the sense, if you can think it, you can build it, whether it be right now, with Replit, you can do an app or a website. You'd be able to do that with physical products and everything. So I think, but yeah, I don't know how you handle, people that I don't know, do you do UBI? Do you do that type of stuff? I don't know how you handle kind of this whole world on that front. But I think from an artist or an entrepreneurial point of view, it's a great world.
Peachy.
Yeah, I think we're definitely headed into the golden age. I feel very confident about that. I think it's going to be, God willing, 12 years. I have to stay optimistic about, yes, there's all these things that could go wrong, but yes, everything's looking amazing. It's been 3 weeks, and it's just already been like 10 years in 3 weeks of great, incredible achievements. I think that to me, the biggest fight that's coming up, and I don't know if it'll even be in the next couple of years, it may be in the next administration, is going to be, as the kind of like MAGA populist world, Christian populism, and the kind of tech bros, the tech right, as they kind of both merge into this sort of big unified, wonderful collective that has been powering MAGA right now. There's going to be a battle, and the battle is going to be really over biotech, not really, I feel like, over AI even as much, because there's some major like moral nuclear bombs that are going to hit. And so these allies who are allies right now, everyone is friends, but at some point the Catholic bros and the tech bros are going to have a war over cloning people to harvest their organs for sale, and engineering genomes for all your children, and what does that mean? What kind of where are we going down that territory to sort of like perfecting the human being and artificial wombs? All of those things which are coming. The toothpaste is out of the tube, as my friend Razib Khan has warned me. He's like, warning, sorry, PG, it's coming. But like, there's going to be a war of some kind between those two camps. And so that is very interesting to me.
There is also, before the response, okay, so there is an interesting thing to me here when it comes to the orthobros and the cath bros. So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with the Whatever podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the guys there who goes by Sovereign Bra, he comes from a Jewish family, and he converted to Christianity. And, you know, he doesn't have the most wonderful things to say about, you know, his people, you know, of that he converted out of. But he and the people in that podcasting world, they depend, their lifeblood is having these OnlyFans thoughts who go on their program.
Right.
So I'm not really seeing as pure of a, you know, being a monk and settling away from technology. Like, I think technology is something that substantially affected anyone, you know, the most hardcore trad cath is going to be very online, and they are going to know exactly what the deal is with all of these different things that people are consuming, because we live in a house of mirrors. They cannot separate themselves from the culture at large. And even if they try to change it, their existence still depends on talking about, you know, look at all these horrible, you know, sexy OnlyFans thoughts. Look at how, you know, how they dress. Look at their big bouncing breasts. Isn't this horrible? You know, shame on you.
I think it's no different than doing OnlyFans yourself, like that, hosting that type of thing. It's the same.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, they kind of depend on that to make money. And I think that that's what a lot of people who are within that space or this space, you know, also depend on. There needs to be some enemy to focus on. But by focusing on the enemy, you're also giving that enemy a lot more power. You're giving them, you know, how do you say, like a rent-free, you know, real estate in your head. So I'm not really sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. You disagree?
When I've seen clips of that podcast, those girls are not doing themselves any favors. I mean, maybe it's good for their own personal careers, but I think it is really makes the whole world look so seedy and so gross. So I don't know, maybe shining a light on it
for that purpose. Like, it's like Jon Stewart would always. I remember I was the most annoying thing in the Daily Show. Go to a Republican event in like 2012 and find maybe someone who is literally the worst communicator, might be a great person. And the worst communicator is a nice way to put it. I don't want to say dumb and all that, and I'm not going to. But that's the thing, is that's what he does. It's the same trick where you find someone that has no ability to communicate, and then publicly humiliate them, and then make money off of that.
Well, the Whatever podcast is, I don't like it for that reason, and I think it's not necessary. But I don't think it's a good example of like these Catholic bros are out of control. I don't really think that that's what they are. So.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that they're out of control, but I think that they exist much like a lot of people exist in this online world on generating clicks. And you're kind of forced to accompany yourself into what exactly am I going to say that's going to bring more eyes. And that's a very difficult thing to escape from, right? Like, it also means that if there were certain ideas that the other side would have, you know, that the opposition would have, even if they were good ideas, if somebody who was from the opposition were to champion those ideas, they wouldn't get any favor for doing that from their fans. Their fans are, why are you talking about this? We hate this. You know, like, and the more we're connected to this online ecosystem, the more of that's going to happen. Like, how exactly do you guys think we're going to be able to get past that and not rely so much on the audience controlling us?
I mean, going back to your original question of like, where is this all heading? Like, it's not just that the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's kind of been out of the tube since like at least Martin Luther. Like these trends are kind of hard to reverse. We're very far from like our Dunbar number evolutionary environment. Many of our problems of modernity stem from that. Social media is just another layer on top of that. And so like, I can give you my optimistic vision and I think what I think is more likely. But my so at the very top of this conversation, I said that the DOGE had three purposes. One was the fiscal conservatism stuff. One was the dismantling the deep state and the GAE. The third is like preparing the US government and our institutions for AGI. Because Elon Musk has short timelines. He thinks it's going to be here next year at the latest. What happens in that world? Like, we need completely new kinds of institutions. We need to have at least everything. We need, like, the treasury payment system should at least like have a memo line filled out. Like, there's a lot of things that we need to prepare for that. And Elon walks around. He's been some written about this with an omega point pendant on. I don't know if you know what the omega point is, Lev.
I think so. It's when we have singularity, right? It's that point where everything kind of combines
Right.
together into one.
Yeah, the early Russian futurists, the sort of cybernetic thinkers, saw all of human history as merging, converging towards this one omega point, this bottleneck that we'd pass through and enter into the kind of post-human transition. Grimes is maybe already through that transition, but like this goes to Peachy's point that this will be a showdown, because right now the Trump administration has embraced a kind of accelerationist point of view on AI. JD Vance, who I kind of look like, just gave a talk at Paris saying that, we don't think AI is going to kill all the jobs. We're going to make sure AI is pro-human. But there's only so much that policy can do to control the development of technology. Like, the agricultural revolution was not in anyone's control, and the hunter-gatherers didn't really survive. So, like, we're going to go through this transition. The positive vision I have for this is, could we use AI to sort of rectify the crisis of modernity, to sort of right-size our environment and solve the kind of evolutionary mismatch where we can have like homeschools again and look like townhouse schools, because the labor costs of having an AI tutor are so much lower, so on and so forth. I think what's more likely is we're just going to have like a very sci-fi kind of future, like barring doom, one where there will be the holdouts that don't want to get their mind uploaded, but they will last about as long as the hunter-gatherers and be surpassed. And this is something that needs to be better communicated on the right, because this is not really in anyone's control. This is a deeper structural force, and we're just riding this wave. And as an internet native, as someone who grew up on like Newgrounds in the 90s, like I'm more on the Grimes side. Like, I'm ready to upload and do the merge, but I also have a foot in this more communitarian conservative world where I understand that there's going to be things that we lose from that. And right now I see no one on the right actually taking that trade-off seriously and even presenting it as a trade-off. It's just like full steam ahead. We'll try to like ban IVF or something like that. But like, there's going to be a lot more than that. We're going to have centuries of progress compressed into decades, and you're not going to be able to stop what people put in their body or choose to manipulate themselves. Like, if you think the trans debate was bad, the transhumanism debate is going to be a trillion times worse.
Even before we get to that point, though, I'm very curious about what you think about this hive mind mentality that ends up affecting, the people in whose world we are right now, online commentators, where the audience ends up capturing them, and then they are going to be a lot more reluctant, especially maybe with AI in the future. They're going to be a lot more reluctant to say something as an objective truth, as opposed to something that is purely subjective for their audience, who accept that as the objective truth, regardless of any evidence. Like, what do we do about that? Can we do something about that?
Will we have YouTube commentators in 10 years? It's like, or will we all just be like watching VTubers who secretly are controlled by LLMs?
Interesting. So what you're saying is that at that point, it doesn't even matter that whatever we're doing over here is already a dinosaur compared to what's coming as far as how people are influenced.
I believe in a version of like, Balaji Srinivasan talks about history running in reverse, where, in some ways our modern media ecosystem looks a lot more like the 1800s, where it's like a lot of tabloid journalism, a lot of fake news. Back then it was the problem that it took like a week for the news that Lincoln got shot to make it across the country. Today, like, there's just so much a barrage of things you don't know what to believe. Like, this trend, we sort of peaked with the high modernist period and like 3 TV channels. Then we had cable news and talk radio, and then the internet. And we're moving into a world that's much more fragmented. And so this is what I was gesturing at as sort of the best landing spot for this is to like a new kind of localism, right? Where we don't have these mass media celebrities that control meta narratives. We all have a kind of codex wrapped around our own little community culture. And partly because like the hinterland will be too much of a miasma to deal with.
Yeah, I agree that would be for the best. I'm not really seeing as much like people like talking about fragmentation. I'm not seeing as much fragmentation as opposed to just two big sides where one of these is like, like the pro leftist, pro, shitlib, whatever, bring in more migrants, that is like one side, and the other side is more of the MAGA side. So people tend to fall into those groups much more than like smaller groups that are all kind of competing for attention. At least that's my view.
I mean, more like the market structure. Like look at how media has just collapsed, right? Going from, a few big cable channels controlled by Viacom and CBS and stuff like that to like now the White House press corps is going to be a bunch of TikTokers and like alt media. Like those same market dynamics are now playing out in every industry. And once we have like drop-in remote workers, to Erik's point, we're going to be able to like with one click build websites, build apps, build physical products, and that's the kind of fragmentation I'm talking about. And I think the culture will follow that in the longer run.
Erik, you agree?
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And like I said, the idea guy will win in the end. And I think, Samuel is right on the mark with what he said.
Excellent. And with that, I am not going to go yet because I want to try a little experiment here. This is a live stream. What I want to try, you guys do not have to stick around. What I want to try is bringing in some of the people who are in spaces right now to have conversations with us. This dual space YouTube thing has not been done before. I do not want you guys to stay here if you guys have to go right now, because this is kind of the end of the show. But I do want to see if it actually works. So that's what I'm going to do. So for those who want to stick around just for a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on a program which is called Voice Meter on my computer. And I'm going to ask the people who are sticking around to do the reverse of what they did before. So you would mute StreamYard and you would unmute your Twitter Spaces, X Spaces. And let's see if that works. If it doesn't, that's absolutely fine, but I want to give it the old college try. So that is what I'm going to do right now. But you guys tell me, are you able to stick around for a little bit?
I got to head out, but
I got to drop too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lev. Amazing show. Great meeting you, Peachy. Great meeting you, Sam. You're all terrific. Great to be on with people way smarter than I am, so thank you.
Where in the world are you, Erik? You look sweaty.
When am I sweaty? No, I'm in Florida, and I just was swimming, and then I did this show, so I was on the beach, and then I came here to go swim.
He's tanned. He's relaxed.
No, it's water and sweat, and it's
where in Florida?
The ocean, Palm Beach. I'm in Palm Beach.
Okay.
Nice.
So,
and where can people find you, Erik?
Lev.
Before you guys go, in your beautiful white shirts, where could people find the two of you, and what are you working on now? Just the final plugs here.
You go, Peachy.
I have to drop. You guys can find me on Twitter, on X, at Keenan Peachy, and Substack, KeenanPeachy.com. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for sticking around, and for you guys. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. And where can we find you, Erik?
Yep, I'm at Erik Finman, ErikFinman. Again, thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I'm going to head out now. Bye, everyone. Great
Bye, guys.
meeting again, Lev. Great meeting the other two of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. So there we go. Now, Sam, that we are here together, I wanted to ask you a little bit while I'm trying to configure here, where exactly do you see the Trump administration's view of artificial intelligence versus the past Biden one? Because from what I understand, what Mark Andreessen was talking about is that the Biden administration has been completely against AI, or if they were to utilize AI, they wanted to be the ones, like the government were to be the power that would use it. But at the same time, we also had like OpenAI and things like that, which weren't controlled by the government. So was it a matter of the Biden administration wanting this to happen, but not really being able to do it? Or like, what's the history there?
Yeah, so the Biden admin didn't do that much because we didn't pass any laws. There was an executive order that required the biggest companies to just notify the government when they did large training runs, and that's been repealed. There was a attitude that training very powerful AI systems and eventually AGI is so capital intensive that there will end up being only a handful of dominant players, and maybe only one if they achieve like recursive self-improvement and take off. And so there was this attitude that like the way we're going to control this, in lieu of passing a law against open sourcing dangerous models is to have some kind of soft power over that company to make sure that they play along and they cooperate with the national security state. That's actually continuing, right? So, Anthropic, OpenAI, even Google now have partnerships with the Defense Department. Google actually just recently updated their mission statement to remove the part about never working for the military or whatever. So that's still happening. On the other hand, we now have models like DeepSeek and the continuing decline in cost, where it's become apparent that we're going to have very powerful capabilities that diffuse by default. There's no hope of having just the big hyperscaler keep it behind API. What this means for Trump policy going forward, I think that they're all in on energy, and the main bottleneck in AI is energy. Yes, the chips really matter, and we need to defend our chips and keep our export controls robust. But China's adding hundreds of gigawatts of energy a year, where we're actually decommissioning coal mines, and our electric grid doesn't have the capacity. So we really need to catch up on the energy front. That's what they're mainly doing. They do have to develop this action plan, but I do think there will come a point where, there's a lot of people. There's the Mark Andreessens who are sort of cyber libertarians. They want to. And the true accelerationists who want to bring on the singularity. I think most people on the right who like AI are just kind of techno optimists. They think this is going to lead to better healthcare and better industries and so on and so forth. They don't actually understand the full implications of what it means to have a superhuman autonomous system that can do literally everything a human can do, and for that to be fully democratized, right? These are package deals. The Industrial Revolution, no one planned that. There are all kinds of second order effects that we have to anticipate. And I don't think Trump himself is a cyber libertarian. So I think there's chances here for for the right to go left and vice versa, where if very scary capabilities start to emerge, that there is action to try to forestall the most catastrophic outcomes.
I hope you're right that there is a chance. We are going to open it up to the people now. So now it's time for the great experiment here. So Sam, you are going to do the reverse. You are going to mute the StreamYard tab, and you are going. Oh, you've done that. Okay, perfect. I guess that didn't even make a difference. You could have unmuted it this whole time then, probably, for the people listening. But anyway, now I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to mute this tab. Let's see what happens. So I'm not going to be able to hear anything from this tab anymore. But now I am also unmuting. Could I unmute this? Yes, so now I unmuted this mic, which hopefully is going to work. And if it's not, it's okay. It's a good experiment. And now I'm going to go into here. And I'm going to unmute this tab. Wait, was this tab not muted this whole time either? What is going on here? Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I see the audio, but it's not coming through Spaces, so I'm not.
I hear you. I'm listening to you.
I see that I am being heard right now, and I see, Samuel, that you are talking. I'm trying to figure out why that is. That is weird. So I'm not even sure how we're going to be able to make this work right now. So anyway, this is the end of the show. I tried my best. I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, figure out exactly how to make this work, but I'm going to do it in a separate stream just to experiment here. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much, Samuel, for being here. Thank you to all the wonderful people. This is still a work in progress experiment. I'm probably going to make another one right after this just to figure this stuff out. But thank you guys so much. Take care. Oh, and Sam, where can people find you?
Hammond right there.
There we go. If you heard it there, then you heard it there. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much. Take care. Bye-bye. I'm closing this. There we go. Bye-bye. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. There we go. Let me just, yeah.
I can hear you fine through the...
Yeah, so you can hear me, and yeah, the space is still ongoing because, fuck it, why not? But I really want to figure out exactly what I'm doing wrong here, because my idea is that now I want to start streaming the spaces into YouTube. And you see over here, I have this screen with the people who are watching this. So I want to direct this audio to come in, and it should actually be coming. Yeah, I don't think I need to mute StreamYard, though, because it should be coming in through here. Oh, you know what? Maybe if you mute yourself here, let me try one more thing here. I mean, it doesn't even matter because now the stream is over, but just so I know for the future, if you mute yourself here, I'm going to mute you right now. So you're muted here, and I mean, for me, it doesn't, I don't think it matters. Yeah, and now I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to try a different audio source. So instead of cable output, I'm going to try something else. Samuel, could you talk? And while you're talking, I'm going to look at the audio waveforms here, because I'm not really seeing my own. Yeah, so keep talking. Oh, in fact, let me see over here in voice meter.
I left the Twitter Spaces. I don't know why.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
I got a jet.
All right, Samuel, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Hmm.